Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus show. We are brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. We encourage you to go check out the multitude of progressive products and offerings that we have there. Well, also check us out on all of our social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and anywhere you might pick up your podcast. I am here today, as always, with my good buddy, Caleb. How are you doing today, Caleb?
I'm doing great today, Mark. How about you?
Excellent. Yeah, I'm doing really pretty good. I'm excited about our show as always. And as always as well, we need to remind people, if you have not seen ANDOR, which we'll be talking about today, you might want to pause this and come back after you've watched it, because this is not a spoiler-free zone. As a matter of fact, it's a spoiler-full zone, so just be prepared for that. We like to geek out about it and talk about all the pieces, even the pieces that would spoil it if you haven't seen it. And as we always do, Caleb, it is time to share what themed drinks that we are doing. ANDOR was an interesting one to come up with a themed drink. I am very curious to see what direction you went on this.
Yeah, so a lot of times what we do is we look and see if there are pre-made themed drinks. Mark sometimes creates his own. I'm not typically that creative, but there aren't a lot for ANDOR. So I went and I just did something in the Star Wars universe that appealed to me, that spoke to me.
Fair enough.
So I have got a Grogu here.
Oh, I love it.
Can you see
it? Even looks a little bit like Grogu. I like it.
Yeah, it's
eyes,
green.
You got the color, the lime ears. I like it.
Yes.
Nice.
So it's a spiked mountain. It's a spiked Mountain Dew. Mark. Okay, so it's Mountain Dew and vodka. It's very simple to make, so that means you can make it at home if you want. You've probably already got all the ingredients. I love it.
I like it. Well,
how about you?
We're doing ANDOR, which is a prequel to Rogue One. So I went a little rogue. I'm not doing a mixed drink per se. Okay. What I have done is I have my mason jar with vanilla ice cream, and a beer, a double chocolate stout from, as you can see, Rogue Brewery.
Yes.
So I'm taking my double chocolate stout, I'm putting over top of my vanilla ice cream for a chocolate stout float. So I of course this is going to be good, but I figured, play with the Rogue idea a little bit. Use Rogue Brewery, go a little rogue and do this. So cheers to you, sir. And here's to a good show. We'll catch all the rest of you on the other side of this break.
Moonshine Jesus, nobody in the sky. Moonshine Jesus, baby, alright. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus show, where today we are talking about the new Star Wars series streaming on Disney Plus, ANDOR. So ANDOR is this part of the ever-growing Star Wars universe. It is a prequel to the Star Wars spin-off film Rogue One, as Mark mentioned, and we get to follow the thief turned rebel spy Cassian Andor during the 5 years leading up to the film. And so if you're not super familiar with how the Star Wars universe works, there are a lot of different shows going on right now streaming on Disney Plus, and a lot of them take place at different times. So this takes place between the prequel trilogy that we got in the early 2000s and the regular trilogy that came in the 70s and 80s. And so if you have a hard time following that out there, folks, don't worry, you're not the only ones. This is one of the challenges of being a Star Wars fan, is that you have to kind of exist in multiple times to really get a feel of us.
We're talking about a prequel to a prequel, right? Rogue
Yes.
One is the prequel to the original trilogy, and then Andor is the prequel to the so yeah, timelines get a little weird.
And I've got to admit, Mark, even to give that summary, I had a visual image of all of the Star Wars franchise movies and series so that I could keep track of exactly
Makes
where
sense.
this fell, you know?
Yeah,
But here's the
completely
exciting
makes
thing.
sense.
It does have to do with Rogue One, which is a
Yeah.
very unique Star Wars film.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so I don't know about how you felt about this, Mark, but I was kind of
Mhm.
surprised to see that we got this this kind of prequel to Rogue One come out.
Yeah.
Were you surprised that that happened?
Yeah, I didn't see it coming at all. I mean, I thought Rogue One itself was a little unusual because we were getting kind of a backstory to how did Princess Leia get the plans from R2D2 so that they could figure out how to take out the Death Star. And I didn't necessarily, as even Rogue One was announced, think I'm not sure like how engaged am I going to be with that particular story. Turns out one of the best movies.
Super.
It's just
Yeah.
incredible. But yeah, when they announced that they were going to do a prequel to the prequel, I was like, well, what more story is there to actually tell here? And I've been really pleasantly surprised because,
Very good. Yeah.
and we can get into this in the political part, but I mean, this is a very political story. And what we have, this is the reason I was pleasantly surprised. It's so different than regular Star Wars. We're seeing common folks take on the Empire, and we can talk about that, without the Force.
Yeah, right.
You know, there's no special superhuman powers. There's no magical stuff. There's no superheroes that have to be around to confront this oppressive empire. And I'm kind of loving that we finally have that story in Star Wars. Like,
yeah,
it's exciting.
That's it is exciting. The other thing that kind of lends itself to is not so much of a dichotomous good versus evil, you know, like light side of the Force versus the dark side of the Force, but we get a lot more moral gray area. I think is a lot more interesting to explore.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot more like life, where things aren't quite as clear cut as they often are in the movies. And so that's one thing that spoke to me about this right away is we have Cassian, you know, who's got kind of this history that we don't know a ton about and we're learning about, and we get to see him make his way, stealing stuff from the Empire and trying to sell it to make a living. And we see him engage in kind of this kind of moral gray area, which I thought was pretty interesting to explore. What do you think of Cassian as a character? What do you think about him?
I really like Cassian. I find him intriguing and probably one of the more real characters that we've seen in Star Wars just in general, because there's this willingness to do whatever it takes to survive, which honestly is probably true for more folks in the world than these kind of idealistic, where there's either someone who's very, very dark and always kind of like you're saying, the gray area. I love that we get this character that's navigating all these gray spaces, that like anything that he does that might be judged as wrong and we shouldn't be doing those kind of things. In some ways, they also show it like this is what he has to do to survive. Yes, it might not be the way that we see morals should really work out, but we also recognize that he deserves to be able to live and to be able to survive. And, and so they also give the backstory we get in this, which I kind of like about him, because we see at least part of this kind of how he suffered from the Empire abusing the environment, and how that became an oppressive place for him, and how he's a product of that. And ultimately, we're going to see him going up against the Empire that created him to be who he is, which is kind of this beautiful poetic symmetry kind of going on there. I just like every direction it's going in, man. I don't know here are you?
I think you're right. I think that is cool, and I think that it speaks to the vast evilness that Empire often can be, and the kinds of impacts that it can, the negative impacts that it can have that often you don't you don't think about. I also like not just Cassian, but I think there's a richness of other characters, supporting characters that that we kind of get to learn about, and they feel very real too, which I really appreciate. And we still get to see some real strong female characters in here begin to develop as well. And people who are kind of with Cassian, his contact Bix, I think the trader on the planet he's on, and then when he goes and
former girlfriend, I think there's a lot of story there. I think there's some story.
I think there is. I think she's going to be a very important.
I think we're going to get a backstory going on between them. I'm pretty sure they had good chemistry too. I really liked the kind of unintentional flirtation, but removed from each other. You could tell there's a story there.
And I think we're going to find out he's looking for a sister. I think we're going to find out that she's got some kind of an important role. I think that's going to be interesting to see. And even as we're in the episode, we've watched 4 episodes so far, and he's following this female leader who's planning this attack. And so I think that there are lots of other interesting characters that we've begun to see. And I think that's one of the things that has made this really engaging and fun. Is that you get to know the characters and you're going different places in the Star Wars. And
some of them are new characters like Bix and Deidre, who's part of the lead of what becomes probably the Rebel Alliance, and that he's having to kind of follow her lead on. But there's also kind of the fun of getting reintroduced to certain characters like Senator Mon Mothma, where we didn't really know her full backstory. She's incredible. She becomes a chancellor of the New Republic ultimately, but we get to see her home life, and we get to see her early on in separating from the Empire and what they're going to do. And I found that really intriguing. I can't wait to episode 5. Because that dinner that's going to happen at her house, I think
it's going to be a little contentious, isn't it?
It is. And one of the characters that was mentioned is Sly Moore, and that's probably only really deep geeks that understand who Sly Moore is. So Palpatine, the big bad guy, has this woman who kind of is his constant sidekick, bald-headed woman, but she's like this mind control, mind reader, and she's going to be there. So here you have Senator Mon Mothma, who is beginning to break away and help form the Rebel Alliance, who's going to be, right now at least, the seating chart has her right beside Sly Moore. I think the next episode is going to be fireworks, man. We haven't had any fireworks yet to speak of, but outside of, it was cool when he was escaping and all of the chains dropped down and all that was a little bit of fireworks, and it was cool. It was really But I think that's another great part of it. It's such a beautifully shot show. Like the graphics really are incredible. The costuming, man, is off the charts. Like I like everything about the show so far.
I do too, and I think that's another thing that we don't talk about a whole lot on the show, but it's one of the things that makes it feel real is whenever you've got kind of a full universe that with you've got an alien language fully developed. People aren't just speaking in English, and we get to see that some on Kenari when we see Cassian as a kid. We get to we get textures of different planets and different backgrounds, and that's one of the world building things that makes it feel very real. And that's one of the things I think, the Star Wars universe has done very well in these streaming shows is that it really expanded the universe in such a way that we've seen a lot more world building where we're not just going to the same places, to the same planets, and we get to feel a little bit more immersed in the universe. So I'm with you. I think that's one of the things that really makes it kind of fun, especially if you're Star Wars geeks like we are, and you want more, no matter how much they get, even if it's kind of a niche little story that you're still like, more. I need more Star Wars. There's not enough Star Wars, And so it's been fun to see, and we've gotten a lot of Star Wars this year. And so it's been
really great too. And
Yeah,
I kind of
it has
love
been.
that they're kind of going in so many different cool directions. Like you
Yeah.
have Obi-Wan, which in a lot of ways just plays to fandom. I mean, it gives a little
Right.
backstory of Obi-Wan, but also it's really just the build up to
Mhm.
getting to see another Obi-Wan and Darth Vader fight. So great,
Right.
wonderful, love
Yeah.
it. But then we also get Andor, which is this really
Mhm.
dark and gritty, down to earth.
Mhm.
Like the Force really has very little to do with this, but it's set in the same
Yeah.
universe, but it's still doing the same thing that Star Wars has always done and making commentary about fascist regimes.
Mhm.
I love how they're giving us all these different approaches to that storyline. I think it's a really well thought out. In a lot of ways, I feel like it does everything for Star Wars that they're doing for Marvel, in that we get all these different types of approaches to telling the story. And I don't know that any other two themed storylines have ever done this, where we're not just superhero. We're comedy. We're down to earth. We're
Mhm.
like, I love that they're giving us all these different approaches and ways of enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the many advantages I think of these streaming services. You know, there's a lot of debate about
Mhm.
about streaming services and their
Sure.
value, but one of the really cool things about it is that really allows us to have these kinds of you wouldn't have been able to
Mhm.
have even
No.
a decade ago. We
I mean,
never would
we
have
did
gotten this kind
She-Hulk
of
just a few weeks
yeah.
ago. We did
Yeah.
and I mean, a comedy about a female Hulk. I mean, who would have ever imagined? But
Right.
because
How
we
would that be
have
success? Yeah.
right, but because we have Disney, we got it, and I'm
Mhm.
glad we
Mhm.
got it because it's incredible, right?
Yes, it
And
absolutely is.
and that's probably the same thing with Andor. Andor. I mean, what's the chances that a non-Force themed show about Star Wars could be made outside of,
It's
a
zero. I
particularly
mean, there are no lightsaber fights, right? That's
right,
that's
right.
that's what Star Wars was all about,
I don't
right?
think we're
It's
Force shows
lightsaber.
in. We're Force shows in.
No,
I don't think
no,
anyone's
no
even
lightsaber.
mentioned the Force.
No, they haven't. They haven't. We
No.
haven't seen a lot of things that are typical
Mhm.
of Star Wars, or you know that if
Yeah.
you had to ask anyone on the street, "Hey, tell me about Star Wars," they'd say,
Right.
the Force and the Millennium Falcon and
Right.
lightsabers and stuff like that."
Mhm.
We haven't seen any of that. Um,
No.
so Mark, we could geek out about Star Wars all freaking day.
Oh.
But
Very,
you know
very
what?
easily. Yeah.
Very easily, and we would left to our own
We would.
devices. We
Right.
absolutely would.
Absolutely.
We'd sit and drink our
Absolutely.
Star Wars drink and we'd talk about it. But you know what?
Mhm.
The cool thing about Star Wars is not just that
Mm.
it's a fun sci-fi fantasy show, but
Right.
as you've already alluded to, the fact that it's really applicable to how we think about, especially Empire in our lives. So let's listen to the drop. Let's come back. Let's talk about the social and political themes to Star Wars Andor.
Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You've joined us now for our Theo Politico segment of the show. So I want to slowly build on the Theo Political here. We're going to lean pretty heavily towards political, although just because of the nature of the Gospels, it's also theological. So one of the first big key events that happens in this in Andor is Cassian ends up in a place where he's in an alley, and two pre-more authority kind of figures are, I don't know, they're shaking him down. It's not quite clear, but they're trying to shake him down, and ultimately he ends up killing them, right? And as the news gets, like, he goes back to his home planet and he realizes that probably that's going to cause a problem. But the thing that I'm curious about, the statement that's being made and your thoughts on it are, as he's back on his home planet, we cut back to the Pre-Mor authorities in their home offices. And there's one particular character who his name's Karn, who's becoming sort of obsessed with who killed these folks, and we need to do something about it. But his boss basically says, listen, these guys, who knows what they were doing? It could look bad for us, so maybe we shouldn't like really pay much attention. But Karn's like, look, they were killed. There's something wrong here. We need to do it. I'm curious, do you think, was it intentional of having the big boss say, hey, listen, no, don't worry about it? Is this basically a commentary on capitalism and that workers are expendable?
Oh, now that's kind of an interesting thought about that. I like that. I hadn't thought about it particularly from that perspective. I had been thinking it more in the perspective that just that this was a guy who wanted to keep his job and didn't want anything to get in the way of, but I guess of money making. So I think that makes a lot of sense, Mark. That of course the other side of that is, had they left it alone, everyone would have probably gone about their lives pretty right. I mean, he wouldn't have, Cassian wouldn't have been inspired to go and join this alliance. I don't know. Tell me, you've thought about this. Tell me, what are you thinking? You think?
Well, no, I think it's very intentional. No,
yeah,
I think it's very intentional about capitalism and basically saying that workers are expendable. I think it's a strong commentary that empires really don't value workers, and I think they put it in there intentionally. And I actually think that in the story, in terms of storytelling, and I could be wrong on this, but I it's kind of what I felt about Reva when we were dealing with Obi-Wan. I feel like this is a setup for Karn, for Deputy Inspector Cyril Karn. I think we're seeing him value life. Like, I'm part of the system, but I value life, and so we should go out. So he's already, I mean, we're talking about rogue, right? Because this is a prequel to he's going a little rogue here. He's going against his boss. He's pursuing what he needs to do, and he ultimately gets hurt by it. I kind of feel like what's going to happen here, and I think this is an intentional commentary on how empires end up hurting themselves, much like I think that Cassian's the same thing. The empire was going after like abusing the environment, and it ultimately impacted Cassian. He becomes ultimately a rebel. I kind of feel like we're going to see Karn turn here, just like I kind of thought Reva might. And I think this is the key piece, is where his boss is saying, they're expendable, don't worry about them. And there's this sort of moral certitude of him that people's lives matter. And that I need to pursue this anyway. So I do think that this is an intentional put in there for saying the way that big business and capitalism and empire doesn't really care about people as much as they care about their higher needs and desires and concerns and all of that. And that it's also set up to show that because of that, they create their own enemies, and sometimes from within. Because I feel really strongly, I think Karn is going to turn. I mean, am I?
I think that's a good point. And the other thing, the thing that I appreciated about that whole sequence too, was that, you know, it's also easy to generalize empire, and I feel like that's something that we do a lot. You know, even today, when we're talking about empire, it's easy to generalize and lump everyone in without realizing that there is maybe some dissension in there too. And that's one of the things that I appreciated about this, was it's nuancing that a bit too, and to say, hey, not everyone in there necessarily agrees with what's happening, and that there
Right.
is room for some moral action even within kind of this thing that may be ultimately evil. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who is a cog in the system is evil
Right.
as well, because I think that's something that we often do mentally, is just think, well, that means that every
Oh, yeah.
person who is somehow affiliated with the empire is evil. And it's just like when we think about the empire, the Roman Empire in the Gospels, right? To recognize that, like,
Right.
okay, well, Paul was a Roman citizen, right? Paul
Right.
was a part of the empire, and also Christian. And so I think that the nuancing of that is important. And I think that's one of the things that we see in shows like this that we don't get a lot if we're just watching the movies. We see maybe some redemptive arcs or something, but we don't get a lot of nuance to the characters who are participating in Empire.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Well, speaking of Empire, I want to read a quote to you from one of the actors in this. And it's the actress that plays Cassian's adoptive mom. Fiona Shaw is the actress name. Here's her quote about the show. And I just want to I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to let you react. Here's her quote. Our world is exploding in different places right now. People's rights are disappearing, and Andor reflects that. In the show, the Empire is taking over, and it feels like the same thing is happening in reality too.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great quote, and I think right in a lot of respects. That it's felt like we were kind of at a boiling point for a long time, and I think especially during the Trump presidency, it's felt like a boiling point, and it felt like. And things did explode to some extent with the January 6th insurrection, but it felt like had Trump gotten elected again, that somehow things would have been even worse. And so it has felt a lot like these themes of empire, that even though the United States is empire and and is oppressing others and even has colonies. We don't like to call them that, but we have, colonies, right, as empire, that even though we've been operating in that way, a lot of us have not, I don't think, viewed the United States as empire or as evil. And so like a lot of the empire language in the Bible felt very kind of foreign until all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, this can easily turn, and wow, it can be really evil. And so I think that a lot of us began to feel that pressure from 2016 to 2020 in particular. And so in Star Wars, we see these people who are giving their life to work on this planet, and all it takes is this one little bit of action for them to really rebel. And I'm trying to remember the quote where so that character, she says, "This is what a reckoning looks like. This is what a reckoning sounds like." And so that's all it takes, is that one final straw for those people to have had enough and rise up. And so I am wondering what it takes for us to have had like a final straw to say, we have to do something about empire. What's the final straw, Mark?
Well, I don't know, but I like your answer to this question, and it leads right into what is my follow-up question. So is Star Wars to the United States as Revelation is to Rome?
So is it making
allegory,
a tongue-in-cheek commentary about
allegories pointing to the empire and trying to reveal stuff and ultimately be hopeful? Like, is this a Revelation, in my opinion, is ultimately trying to offer hope to folks under Roman oppression. Is Star Wars offering hope to folks who stand over and against authoritarian heavy-handed fascism where conformity and control rule the day.
I like that reading. I think though that one issue is that okay, John on Patmos, writing allegorically and Revelation about the Roman Empire, was ultimately writing to people who were oppressed and wanting to give them hope, right? So he was writing to fellow Christians who were actively being persecuted by the Roman Empire. Star Wars tends to appeal in particular to kind of white male nerds in the United States, right? Who are already in a position of power. So if it is in a position to people who are in a position of power, does it have the opposite effect of like escapism from the real life issue if it's not to people who are actively being oppressed?
I think that's an interesting approach to the question, but I also say, like, it's not simply just to white male geeks. It appeals to a lot of folks. And I wonder if it's slightly more sophisticated than Revelations in that it is trying to speak to people who may not realize how oppressed they actually are. And I'm not just saying white male geeks. Folks who maybe look up to and worship the empire and don't realize what their life looks like because of their devotion to the empire. And it might be this story of trying to say, recognize what's really going on here, because not only your life, but the lives of other people that the empire is impacting could be changed if you would just open your freaking eyes and see the damage that's happening. I mean,
I think one issue is that a lot of folks don't make the connection with the United States actually being empire and oppressive.
Agreed.
And so I think that's one of the primary issues of our time, is that we have this narrative that, the United States is all this place where people have pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, and it's a place where people are self-made, and it's a place that is a mixing pot. And a lot lot of that just isn't really true,
Right.
And so
No.
I think a lot of people have failed to recognize the fact that the United States has done a lot of things that are really evil, not just morally problematic, but are doing things that are really evil. And so, as I was talking about a minute ago, in terms of like us having colonies, I mean, I think Puerto Rico is a case in point of how we've done this, right?
Sure.
So we've disenfranchised these American citizens, and Puerto Rico is in this enormous debt to the United States. It has no representation in Congress other than observer status, right?
Yep,
And so,
right.
We actively oppress the people of Puerto Rico. And keep them intentionally in poverty by holding billions of dollars of debt over their head. So
Right.
I think that's one of the issues that I'm not sure how we quite come to terms with, and that's how we recognize the United States' role as empire. And I don't know how it is that we make that connection for folks.
Well, I don't know how either, and I think unfortunately the connection just isn't being made because even the folks who should recognize it are kind of just so I'm going to use the word patriotic, at least in terms of how it's being presented. Like you feel like you're betraying, like in air quotes, patriotic.
Yeah,
You feel like you're betraying your nation if you question all of that. In a lot of ways, it just makes me remember Padme's quote. So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. And I kind of feel like that's one of those lines that for me just shows what Star Wars is really about, is that this willingness to support empire that's destroying lives and just buy into it over false patriotism or whatever.
Yeah.
Like and even like you're talking about January 6th, there's a little bit of that. There was a whole group of our society that was applauding all of this that was happening. But in the end, it's that is one of the beginnings of the death of any liberty that might ever happen. So, all right, listen, we could go on and on with this. There's this. I think it just shows what an incredibly deep story Andor is if you like sit with it for a little bit.
Right.
But we are running out of time for our show, so we're not going to go any deeper than that. But we will come back and have one of our favorite segments together as we each work our best to make our co-host look stupid.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are entering our final segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment, where we ask each other questions and try to make each other look stupid. Now, Mark is often so benevolent to let me go first. And so today, I thought that I might extend him the same courtesy.
Damn it!
And Mark, today,
I knew it was going to bite me in the butt sooner or later. All right. So
following your lead, Mark.
Fair enough. I knew it was going to get me sooner or later. Okay. So here's my question.
Okay.
Andor obviously focuses around Cassian Andor, and in Rogue One, Andor says that he's been involved in the battle against the Empire since he was 6 years old. In Rogue One, he says 6 years old. In Andor, we've seen him on a planet probably around ages 10 to 12.
That's what it looks like.
It's a group of other kids that seem to be forming their own kind of tribe or whatever and surviving. So my question to you is, where was Cassian when he was 6 years old? How was he involved? What's that coming from, man?
Yeah, he was involved in some kind of secret fighting alliance that he had to keep secret between. A few years
after he's on a planet with just kids surviving as a tribe.
Which is another weird thing that I want to know more about. Where were all the adults? No, look, here's what I think about this. I think that a lot of times we make sense of things retroactively. That when we look back, we look back and say, well, I've been fighting this since I was 6 years old. If you think back to your childhood and you think about how it is that you've done things. And so I think we do this a lot with a lot of things in our lives. We say, let's take our faith journey, for instance. I think that moment was a moment that really inspired me. For me, I remember a mission trip that I went on. And I went and I helped in a homeless shelter. And so, retrospectively, that's important to why I entered ministry. At the time, did I have any idea that was important to me? I don't know. It's something that I've made sense of, made meaning of over the years. I think if we're talking practically, they probably made a continuity error and forgot that they said that.
All right.
What do you think, Mark? Do you think there's something more intentional than
I don't know. I think there might be. I think the fact that there's this group of kids on a planet with no adults is a little too remarkable for there not to be a story behind it. I'm wondering if there isn't a backstory to that we're going to find out about, that at the age of 6, that there was something where his parents were involved and he was tangentially involved, and they end up crashing on the planet and all the adults somehow don't. I don't know. I just know that you're a smart guy. The question was bothering me, so I was really hoping you'd figure it out for me.
Well, I figured it out by dismissing it.
Yeah, fair enough.
So,
Two
you
different
know,
ways. You didn't just dismiss it. You dismissed it two different ways.
I did.
You're like, one, that's how the human mind works, and two, continuity issues. They screwed up.
I really hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Well
Mark,
played.
and
Well played.
I hope we'll get a little more answer. Okay. So, so you mentioned this scene earlier, and I'm really intrigued about this dinner party. It was something that
Yeah.
really grabbed on to me. I think because we got to go to the Capitol, and we got to see the senator that we kind of knew but didn't know a whole lot about, and we get to see her plotting and her relation with her husband. And so this got me wondering, and I'm curious what you think about this, Mark. There are a lot of backroom deals that go on with our senators and representatives. But I'm curious right now at this point in time, who are the people that you would lift up as people who are maybe doing the best work to dismantle U.S. empire? Who are there any are there good senators and representatives who are really working either publicly or behind the scenes to do some real good work to break down empire?
Wow, great question. I think there definitely are. I'm only going to lift up one, and only because of not currently serving, hoping to serve, and because of location. And that's Beto O'Rourke. I really do believe that when you listen to his platform, which has been his platform the last time he ran, is very interested in breaking down the system that has built up and how damaging it can be, and supporting those who it hurts the most. And I really think with the direction that Texas is heading in, that we need someone like him to be elected to change the course of where Texas is heading. And it's interesting that in such a very conservative state that has continually tipped its hat more and more towards that way, that he seems to be doing pretty well. Like, it gives me some real hope. I mean, I don't know. Do you have folks like him that you would lift up as like there's sort of like, for me, he's sort of like a folk hero. I have a lot of respect for who he is and his platform and what he's trying to do in the system. Or do you have folks?
I think he's a great example, especially considering the person he's running against, and exactly as you said, the place he is. I would say Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is another good example of someone who's kind of a folk story, coming from where she comes from in New York, and representing people and really doing a lot of work to break down the system and to speak the truth in power. I mean, people have been so cruel to her simply because of who she is, and because she's an articulate woman, who stands for something and is passionate, and people have been awful. And so her ability to speak the truth in power and to stay true to who she is, when I'm sure it would be much, much easier not to, is a good example. People like that are people who give me hope that, like, okay, maybe there is some goodness in the system. Maybe there is some redemption possible. But I don't
think there's any goodness in the system, but we certainly have some people getting in the system who come from the right places and give us some, in my opinion, hope for fixing the system, maybe.
I like that. I would love to believe that, as that we really could live in a representative democracy, but who knows? Who knows at this point?
And online, one of our viewers, Ellen Green, who's a loyal listener, also lifted up Pete Buttigieg, which, of course, I mean, he is doing great work, has since he was a mayor, and even now is continually moving the system in a healthier place, supporting other folks.
The other thing I really appreciate about Pete Buttigieg is that he is like an authentic progressive Christian. and
Mhm.
that he doesn't have any issues with being able to speak passionately and articulately about how like LGBT issues are compatible with Christianity, and
Yeah,
about how
absolutely.
demanding justice for those in need are compatible with Christianity. And so I think the fact that when
Mhm.
he was campaigning, he was doing so with the Poor People's Campaign was
Oh, yeah.
very emblematic of the kind of leader he is. So I have hope for
Completely
him
agree.
too. Okay, well, hey, we've asked each other some questions.
Yeah.
Great questions today, Mark. Great
Yeah,
conversation,
absolutely.
but we got to close it out, man. And we got to be
Indeed,
thinking about what we're
unfortunately.
going to do next week, right? Because we
Yeah.
could talk about Star Wars for a whole nother week, but we're
For a
not going
lot. No.
to. What are we
So
going to watch next week?
let's do something a little different. We tend
Okay.
to like talk about things that are coming up and about to happen or happening right now.
Mhm.
Let's go back. There is a underwatched show on Netflix that's based on a comic book, a graphic novel that I think deserves some real attention. It came out, I think, in 2020, and it's called "I Am Not Okay with This." And the very simple description is it's about a teenager who navigates the complexities of high school, family, and her sexuality while dealing with superpowers.
Ooh.
It should be good. It's very intriguing for sure. And I think
I'm
we could have a great
excited about
conversation.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't believe there is
Yeah.
anything from 2020 that went
Wow,
unwatched
that
for
was
me.
good and redeeming.
But
I
I
know.
didn't watch it. I've never seen it.
How in the world did this escape us? And it's I think 7 episodes, and each episode's only about 30 minutes, so it's literally bingeable in an evening.
We can do it. Yeah.
And so yeah, let's do that and encourage everybody to watch it with us.
Okay, well, that sounds good. Cheers to you, Mark. Cheers to all of you out there. Grogu is gone, but you can still kind of see him here. Cheers to all of you. Yeah, you still got some, don't you?
Yeah, well, there might be a little tiny bit in the bottom, but I'm pretty much at the bottom as well.
You finished yours too. Okay, we finished our
fair
drinks, and we hope to see you next time on the Moonshine Jesus Show.
Moonshine